Part 2, Ghosts in the Machine. The next morning, I woke to the sound of metal clinking against metal, a rhythmic tapping that pulled me from the edges of a dream I couldn't remember. For a moment, I lay there, disoriented, the events of the previous night crashing back into my skull like a starship breaking atmosphere. Suri, the blue-skinned cyborg who claimed to be my wife, the holograms, the way she'd looked at me like I was something precious, something lost. I rolled out of bed, pulling on a grease-stained shirt before padding barefoot into the garage, where the sound was coming from. And there she was, bent over the horizon's exposed engine compartment, her hands moving with a precision that was almost hypnotic, her metallic components catching the dim garage lights as she worked. "What are you doing?" I asked, leaning against the doorway, my voice still rough with sleep. She didn't even look up. "The quantum flux regulator was misaligned," she said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "That's why your engine kept stalling during the ignition sequence." I frowned. "I never told you it was stalling." Finally, she turned, wiping her hands on a rag. "You didn't have to. The wear pattern on the ignition coils told me everything." She smirked, a faint, knowing thing. "Plus, you've always been impatient with calibration. You'd rather brute force a solution than wait for the diagnostics to finish." The accuracy of that statement hit me like a plasma torch to the ribs. "How the hell do you know that?" I demanded, stepping closer. She held out a hydrospanner, handle first. "Because I've watched you repair 100 ships just like this one. Usually while complaining about cutting corners and drinking that awful synthetic coffee you pretend to hate." I took the tool, my fingers brushing against hers, and for a split second, a jolt of something electric, not just the faint biocharge from her cybernetics, but something deeper, something that made my stomach tighten, passed between us. Ignoring it, I climbed into the cockpit and fired up the ignition. The engine roared to life, smoother than it had in weeks, the hum of it vibrating through the ship's frame like a purring cat. "Damn," I muttered, shutting it down and hopping out. "Okay." That was impressive. She shrugged, but there was a glint of pride in her eyes. "It's nothing you couldn't have done yourself. You just needed another set of hands." As if to prove her point, she reached for a calibration tool at the exact moment I was about to ask for it, our movement syncing up like we'd worked together for years. And that's when the unease really settled in. Because this ease, this unspoken rhythm, it didn't feel like a trick. It felt like muscle memory. We spent the next few hours working side by side, falling into a pattern that should have been impossible for two people who'd supposedly just met. She anticipated my moves, handed me tools before I asked, even finished my sentences when I was explaining a repair strategy. It was unsettling. More than that, it was familiar. And then, as I was tightening the last bolt on the secondary thruster array, another piece of the puzzle slammed into place. "The Artemis," I said suddenly, the word leaving my mouth before I could stop it. Suri froze. "What about it?" I blinked, the image flashing behind my eyes, a sleek, silver ship, faster than anything in the fleet, its cockpit designed for two. "We built it together, didn't we?" My voice sounded distant, like I was hearing it through water. "A prototype. For cross-species neural interfacing." Her breath caught. "You remember?" I didn't. Not really. But the ghost of it was there, teasing the edges of my mind. Before I could answer, a sharp beep from the ship's console cut through the air. Suri's head snapped toward it, her cybernetic eye whirring as it focused. "Proximity alert," she said, her voice tight. "Someone's here." And that's when the shooting started. Part 3, Shadows and Gunfire. The first plasma round shattered the garage's overhead light in an explosion of glass and sparks, plunging half the room into darkness. I hit the deck instinctively, my shoulder slamming against the cold metal floor as another shot seared past where my head had been a second earlier. Across from me, Suri moved like liquid lightning, her cybernetic arm snapping up as a hidden compartment slid open, revealing a compact pulse pistol that whined to life with a high-pitched charge. "Mercs," she hissed, her voice barely audible over the ringing in my ears. Nexus Syndicate hired guns. Another barrage of fire peppered the hull of the horizon, each impact sending vibrations through my bones. I scrambled behind a stack of reinforced cargo crates, my mind racing. How had they found us so fast? The answer came the moment my fingers brushed against a faintly vibrating patch on the ship's undercarriage, a disc-shaped device no larger than a credit chip, its blinking red light nearly invisible in the shadows. Tracking beacon, I spat, ripping it free. They planted this before you even got here. Suri's eyes flashed with realization. They were waiting for me to lead them to you. The garage door exploded inward with a concussive boom, revealing 3 armored figures silhouetted against the smoke. Their armor bore no insignias, just matte black plating and mirrored visors that reflected our startled faces back at us. The lead merc raised his rifle, a brutal-looking mag-rail carbine, and time seemed to slow. Then Suri moved. Her first shot took the merc square in the throat, the pulse round overloading his armor's electrical systems and sending him convulsing to the ground. Before the others could react, she was already spinning, her free hand yanking me forward as she kicked over a workbench, sending tools and spare parts clattering between us and our attackers. Engine access tunnel, she barked, shoving me toward a narrow maintenance hatch at the rear of the garage. Go. I didn't argue. We belly-crawled through 50 meters of pitch-black conduit, the sounds of shouted orders and boot steps fading behind us, until we burst out into the sickly yellow light of Proxima's lower district alleys. Rain sheeted down in icy curtains, turning the walkways into reflective rivers as we sprinted between sagging prefab buildings. Suri's hand never left my wrist, her grip firm as she navigated the maze-like slums with terrifying familiarity. You know where you're going, I panted, not a question. She glanced back, rainwater streaming down the metallic ridges of her face. Safe house. 2 clicks east. A sudden burst of automatic fire chewed into the wall beside us, showering my cheek with concrete fragments. They'd picked up our trail. The next few minutes blurred into a nightmare of ducking, weaving, and near misses. Suri moved like a ghost, taking down 2 more pursuers with frightening efficiency, her cybernetics granting her reflexes no purely organic being could match. But when we rounded the final corner to the safe house, my blood turned to ice. The door hung off its hinges. Inside, the place had been torn apart, every terminal smashed, every data drive missing. A single phrase was spray-painted across the far wall in glowing phosphorescent ink, "We remember what you forgot." Suri made a sound I'd never heard from her before, something between a growl and a whimper. Then her head snapped up. The backup, she breathed. They didn't find the backup. Before I could ask, she was at the ruined kitchen unit, prying up a floor tile to reveal a hidden compartment containing a single crystalline data chip. It pulsed faintly blue in her palm, matching the rhythm of her cybernetic implants. The Artemis blueprints, she whispered. The real ones. Not just schematics, the neural imprint patterns. Our life's work. Outside, bootsteps echoed closer. Too many to fight. Too close to run. Suri's eyes met mine, and in that moment, I saw something that shook me deeper than any gunfire ever could, absolute, unshakable trust. Time to see if you really remember how to fly, she said, pressing the chip into my hand as the first grenade came through the window. Part 4, Neural Firewall. The grenade's ignition sequence beeped twice before Suri's arm shot out like a piston, her cybernetic fingers snatching the explosive from midair and hurling it back through the shattered window with inhuman precision. The resulting explosion shook the building to its foundations, buying us precious seconds as we crashed through the safe house's rear exit into a rain-slicked alley. The data chip burned in my clenched fist like a live coal, its pulse syncing unnervingly with my racing heartbeat as we sprinted through the neon-lit labyrinth of Proxima's undercity. Every shadow seemed to hold another syndicate mercenary, every flickering hollow sign a potential threat, but Suri moved with the certainty of someone who'd memorized every sewer grate and maintenance tunnel in this godforsaken district. We burst into an abandoned transit hub, our boots splashing through oily puddles as the distant wail of security drones echoed through the cavernous space. "They're jamming civilian comms," Suri gasped, her breath coming in short, controlled bursts despite our mad dash. "Her cybernetic," I whirred as it scanned the crumbling infrastructure. "We need to reach the old fleet relay tower, only way to get a signal out that they can't block." I opened my mouth to argue when a searing pain lanced through my skull, dropping me to one knee. The data chip in my hand flared blindingly bright as fragmented memories detonated behind my eyes, Suri and I standing shoulder to shoulder in a sterile lab, our hands deep in the Artemis's quantum core as neural interface cables snaked from our temples into the ship's systems. The memory dissolved into static just as quickly as it had come, leaving me gasping on the filthy pavement. Suri was at my side instantly, her hands cool against my feverish skin. "The chip's trying to sync with your neural patterns," she murmured, her voice tight with concern. "Your brain still recognizes the imprint, even if your conscious mind doesn't." Before I could respond, the screech of mag boots on metal echoed from the catwalks above us. A four-man kill team rappelled down on graphene cables, their black armor absorbing the dim light as they fanned out with military precision. The lead merc's visor slid back to reveal a face I'd hoped never to see again, Commander Vex, my old fleet security liaison, the jagged scar across his cheekbone twisting as he smiled. "Larson. You always were too stubborn to die clean." His rifle never wavered from my chest. "Hand over the chip, and I'll make sure the syndicate keeps your girlfriend intact." "Mostly." Suri moved before I could blink. Her left arm split open along hidden seams, revealing a humming plasma conduit that bathed the station in hellish blue light. The first shot took Vex's right hand off at the wrist, his rifle clattering to the ground as he screamed. Chaos erupted. Pulse rounds chewed through concrete as we dove behind a collapsed support column, the data chip's glow intensifying with every passing second. "We can't fight our way out," I shouted over the gunfire. Suri's fingers danced across her forearm display, pulling up a schematic of the transit hub. "We don't have to," she replied, slamming her palm against a rusted service panel. The entire station shuddered as ancient maglev engines roared to life beneath our feet. Time to go off-grid. The arriving train missed us by inches as we leapt onto its roof, the wind screaming in our ears as it accelerated into the tunnels. Behind us, Vex's remaining men opened fire, their shots ricocheting off the passing infrastructure as we disappeared into the darkness. Suri clung to me as the train banked sharply, her body pressed flush against mine. "The chip's fully synced," she breathed against my neck. "It's not just the Artemis schematics in there, it's us. Our neural patterns, our memories. Everything the syndicate tried to erase." The train's emergency light strobed across her face as the truth settled over me like a lead blanket. They hadn't just stolen our ship. They'd stolen pieces of our minds. Part 1, The Stranger in My Garage. The wrench slipped from my sweaty palm, clattering against the metal floor of my garage with a sharp ping. I cursed under my breath, wiping my forehead with the back of my hand. The ancient starship's engine compartment was fighting me every step of the way, and after 3 days of wrestling with its stubborn systems, I was exhausted. My name's Baxter Larson, just a freelance mechanic trying to get a broken-down Horizon-class cruiser spaceworthy again. I'd picked it up for a steal at a Proxima Centauri salvage auction, but the seller had conveniently left out the fact that it needed a full quantum drive overhaul. The garage's climate control had given up hours ago, leaving the air thick with heat, and I was stripped down to my cargo shorts, gloves barely keeping my grip secure against the sweat-slicked tools. Just as I was about to dive back into the mess of wiring, a sudden chill ran down my spine, the unmistakable feeling of being watched. I turned toward the doorway, and my heart nearly stopped. Standing there, silhouetted against the dim light, was a woman, or at least, something close to one. Her skin was a vivid, glowing azure, her short silver hair framing a face that was too perfect to be entirely human. Metallic circuits traced delicate patterns across her arms and neck, pulsing faintly with an inner light. Her eyes, large and luminous, locked onto mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. Baxter, she said, her voice a melodic blend of human warmth and synthetic precision. I've finally found you. The wrench I just picked up hit the floor again. Who the hell are you? I demanded, taking an instinctive step back. How do you know my name? She tilted her head slightly, the motion too fluid, too calculated. You don't recognize me? I scoffed. Lady, I'd remember someone like you. A flicker of something like pain crossed her face. I'm sorry. Your wife. I stared at her, my brain scrambling to process the words. We've never met, I said flatly. I think I'd remember being married to I gestured vaguely at her cybernetic enhancements. A what? She challenged, her voice sharpening. A non-human? A cyborg? I clenched my jaw. I don't know what game you're playing, but it's not funny. Without another word, she reached into a hidden compartment in her forearm, retrieving a small holographic projector. The device flickered to life, casting a three-dimensional image between us, me, unmistakably, with the same scar above my eyebrow from a bar fight on Mars, standing beside her, her form less mechanical but still undeniably alien, my arm around her waist as she leaned into me. We looked happy. We looked real. This proves nothing, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. Tech can fake anything these days. She deactivated the projector with a sigh. I knew you'd say that. Then she stepped closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper. You have a birthmark shaped like the Orion constellation on your right hip. You're allergic to synthetic strawberries but not real ones. And you still have nightmares about the Ganymede incident, the one you never reported because you were afraid they'd ground you. My blood ran cold. The birthmark and allergy could have been dug up from old records, but the nightmares? I'd never told anyone about those. How? Because you told me, she interrupted softly. On our third date, after too much Venusian whiskey, you broke down in my arms about the civilians you couldn't save. My throat tightened. I didn't want to believe her. But the way she looked at me, like she knew me, like she'd memorized every part of me, it sent a shiver through my chest. I don't remember any of that, I admitted, my voice rough. She nodded, her expression softening. I know. And I'm not here to force you to. I'm here because I need your help. She hesitated, then added, quieter, and because I miss you. The real you. Something in her voice cracked through my skepticism. There was a raw, aching honesty there that didn't feel like a trick. What kind of help? I asked cautiously. Her eyes hardened. The accident that took your memories and half my body? It wasn't an accident. We were sabotaged. And the people responsible still think we're dead. I'd like to keep it that way, until we find out who they are and why they wanted us gone. I exhaled sharply, running a hand through my hair. This was insane. But the longer I looked at her, the more I felt something stirring, not memory, not yet, but something deeper, something that made my pulse quicken when she stepped closer. Fine, I muttered. You can stay. One night. Explain everything. But I'm not promising I'll believe you. The smile that lit up her face was brighter than any hologram. That's all I need, she said. A chance. As I led her inside, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life had just split into before and after. And whether that was good or bad? Well, that remained to be seen.